Welcome, everyone, to a fresh edition of Draft on Tap with Danny Shimon and yours truly. Danny will come in just a second. I just want to let people know that on upper right-hand corner, you see that as we are live here on Wednesday night, April 9th, we are 14 days, 21 hours, 56 minutes, and 21 seconds away from the NFL draft, and we are going to bring coverage just about every day until then and a few days afterwards, and then we will all take a big exhalation. And probably nobody bigger than this gentleman right here, Danny Shimon. Danny, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Busy, getting ready for the 2 weeks from tomorrow. It'll be round one will kick off, so I was just getting ready to try to crunch in as much prospects as I can here. Obviously, on my YouTube page, Shimon Draft Scout, I've been posting up videos about prospects, positions of need, particularly for the Bears, and positions that I feel like they could address here, and players that fit that scheme as well. So I'm busy doing that, and obviously doing our second Draft on Tap episode this season, and this is probably gonna be my favorite one. Although don't be offended, but the guest we have tonight is awesome. I look forward to speaking to this gentleman every single time we have a chance to, and especially right before the draft season. So we're really pumped up and excited for tonight's show.
Indeed. When we sat down 3-4 weeks ago, I said, so who do you want me to reach out to? And you mentioned this gentleman first and foremost. His name is Eric Edholm. He is from the NFL.com and various other NFL media outlets. Eric, welcome. And today, just hours ago, you released your big board. Congratulations.
Thank you. Like birthing a small child, right? or like 100 small children, I guess, or 100 large children, maybe you want to look at it that way. But I kept my comments to a minimum. By now, most people know the main players in the draft, the hardcore folks, the folks who are tuning in to hear, who I think the Bears are going to take and all that. But it's an interesting draft, isn't it, guys? I mean, it's got a different feel than recent years. I don't know. It just doesn't. It's not. Every year's a new scene, but man, this year's class is really interesting.
This year, I think it's going to be. I'm sorry, although
no, go ahead.
This year's going to be interesting, Eric, because I'm sure as you've talked to people, your sources around the league, you talk to, depending who you talk to. I mean, some teams have as many as like 10 blue chip grades on players. Some have 15. Some have, name the number. It's like every person you talk to have different numbers. And I think, this is going to be a draft where, in the mid to late first round, we might hear names that a lot of people will be like, whoa, we didn't think it would go that high. But it's all dependent on relatively what the teams have graded, how they see these players. So in that aspect, it's going to be very, very interesting.
Makes it fun. Yeah,
sure does. One of the things I'm going to do over the next few days is compare your the big board with other pundits' big boards, because I want to see if there's a major disparity after those top 6, top 7 as to who you got at 10 and who so-and-so has at 10 and so forth, and go on down the line. It's something that Greg Gabriel and I have been talking about. And he just texted me just about 20 minutes ago. He said, I did that exercise and it's unbelievable. Eric will have somebody at 12 who is on 20 and on somebody else's board. And so that's the kind of weird season it is, isn't it?
And, to me, like if somebody has a player 60th and I have him 70th, okay, not a big difference, right? But the difference, like you said, from 12 to 22, that kind of matters, right? You go from pretty much a guaranteed first round pick. I mean, again, depending on how you do these boards, to somebody who's either going to go in the latter half or is hoping to be a first round pick. So yeah, I mean, my board, does it include my own personal reflections? Of course. How could it not, right? But I definitely leave a lot of the heavy scouting lifting to the people who get paid for a living, and I let them push me around a little bit, right? I took my top 100 version 1, sent it out to a few guys who I've known, and they get out the red pen and start marking it up and like send it back like a disappointed teacher, So I took a few lumps on some guys in the first version, going, it's hard to, for during the season, do all my other stuff and also scout every single player. So I'm going off a little bit of dot connecting at first, but I've definitely caught up and watched a lot of guys over the last 2-3 months, and we'll see how close we get. But I try to reflect league value with my own personal feelings, maybe sprinkled in just a little.
Yeah. Here's what we're going to do. I am going to step away for 15 minutes so two of you guys can talk. I will collect some questions from people in the chat room. And look at what Tooch just wrote. I don't know what the Bears are doing, but here in the bar room, we're trading up for Eric Edholm. I love it, Tooch.
I can be up in Green Bay in 3 hours.
It's not cheap. It doesn't come cheap, so.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, let again talk to my agent. We'll see what we can work out. But
that's amazing.
I'll be up there if you want me.
So I'll be back in a few minutes, and guys, have a good time.
Yeah. So Eric, again, thanks for jumping in and giving us some of your time. I know you're busy, and just like you, I've been trying to catch up as well, man. I've a lot of a lot of long nights and just pounding through the tape, and sometimes my eyes are starting to get glazed as I'm watching so much tape. But but just like I said, we talked about earlier, your top 100 2.0 came out, and not just because you're on the show, Eric, but I'm being serious here. I like yours the best, only because we seem to agree a lot on some of the rankings of these players that we have out there. But obviously, we're a Bear-centric, podcast here, and I've created a YouTube page where I'm just scouting players that I feel like would be good fits for the Bears scheme, whether and their needs right now: offense, defensive line. We're talking about linebackers, running backs, safeties, so on and so forth. So just kind of touching before we get into the Bears, digging deep, just overall, you mentioned how this has been might be like a crazy draft, but last year, obviously the 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12, that was the big thing of opening night and in the first round. Other than maybe 4 quarterbacks going in the first round, which depending on who you listen to, may not be expected. Are you expecting, or actually, what do you think would be something that could send shockwaves through the first round on 2 weeks from tomorrow?
Yeah, I think some potential shockwaves. And again, I'm not going to put odds on them or say, this is a 75% likelihood or anything like that. But it's possible Jackson Dart goes before Shedeur Sanders. I don't know that that's guaranteed. It's going to depend on where the teams are positioned, whether somebody's willing to move up, whether, how patient these teams are. We still haven't heard Aaron Rodgers, what his plans are. Those could be revealed soon. It's possible. But again, as we stand 2 weeks out right now, we don't know what he's doing. We don't know what the Jets' plans are to pair with Fields. We don't know how the Browns plan to fill their void at quarterback, which currently has Kenny Pickett and nothing else. So is Kirk Cousins an option for them after the draft? Is Kirk waiting for them or any other team to not draft a quarterback so then he can waive his no trade contract? I mean, it's, there's a lot of layers going on. So teams have talked themselves into other quarterbacks or believed in them maybe more so than Shedeur in some cases. I don't think it's universal, but I think there are a few teams that are interesting. And, I don't think the Jets are going quarterback in round 1, but what about the Saints at 9? They're a team that nobody's been able to really kind of peg them on they need a cornerback. Yeah, they could use an offensive lineman. Sure. A D lineman, those are needs, but for a team that's basically had to, let a lot of players walk, is in financial straits right now. Derek Carr is coming off an oblique injury and on the wrong side of 30. Maybe they're a quarterback team. So that's something to keep an eye on. How early Ashton Ginty goes. Is he locked in at 6? Is he an option for the Bears at 10? That's another story, because that could affect, do we get a second or maybe even a third running back in round 1? And then, when do the tight ends come off the board? I don't know that Tyler Warren's going to be a top 5 pick, but top 10, maybe, or just outside of it. And then, Colston Loveland, who's coming off the injury, who I think otherwise may have, pushed Warren for tight end 1 honors, depending on the team. But, where does he go off? Where does he come off the board? Is it somewhere like Denver? Is it somewhere a little later than that? I'm kind of curious, because that'll help kind of shape where some of these pass rushers go in this draft.
I agree. And just real quick, I haven't done a deep dive into the quarterbacks just because Bears don't need a quarterback.
Sure, right.
But just, for me, it's I just can't see how people can say, all right, Shedeur Sanders is going to be, late first round pick. And I know Cam Ward, in terms of the physical tools, the arm, and all that stuff. But man, you watch Shedeur Sanders and his pocket presence, his ability, his toughness to take the hits, and yeah, does he hold onto the ball a bit longer than expected? Sure, but I just feel like he's a guy that, to me, that if you're a team even like Cleveland, like number 2, with your situation, and I know maybe banking on Kirk Cousins, but we don't know how that's going to end up. But Cleveland, you mentioned the Saints. And for me, obviously the Steelers, we don't know what Aaron Rodgers, but a sneaky team in there for me. I'm curious of your thoughts for a quarterback. The Colts at 14.
Colts.
Could they? I know they just signed Daniel Jones and they have AR, Anthony Richardson. I'm just curious if they would see it like a Shedeur, or maybe they might fall in love with a Jackson Dart. And could they be someone that surprises all and goes quarterback first round?
Or Tyler Shuck or somebody like that, where they're coming into injury questions, but also experience. So somebody who was once Justin Herbert's backup, or so, I can see that happening. I don't think first round for the Colts. I don't know. They've been playing it pretty close to the vest if that's the case. I haven't heard a ton of first round potential quarterback visits for them. The one team that you may want to file away as just like a dark horse sort of quarterback team too are the Rams. They've been talking to pretty much all these guys, and including Jackson Dart. I don't know that Shedeur's a fit for them necessarily, but I'm sure McVay would love his toughness and accuracy, like you talked about, operating within the pocket, making some plays out of structure. And, the deep ball looked a little cleaner in the pro day for what that's worth, So I don't know. There's just, it's a big mystery. It feels a little bit like that Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis draft, Desmond Ridder, where it's the same sort of, I'm not saying I'm comparing the talents, but the same sort of feel of going into the draft that other than Ward right now, it's hard to make a pairing. I think the Browns and Shedeur make sense, but it's not happening at 2. I just think would have to do it another way, either coming up from 33 or just staying there and sweating it out. So, it's going to be interesting. I think I think Shedeur and the Browns make a lot of sense because of what Kevin Stefanski wants to do, though. Right.
Yeah, it'd be awesome awesome, but it'd be kind of funny if they got Travis Hunter at number 2 and then came back up and got Shedeur. That'd be one of those
way to do it, right? Get your wide receiver / corner at 2,
and then come back and get
the quarterback in the second round, right? Everybody does it that way, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. But okay, so let's dive into the Bears. Obviously, coming into the offseason, the Bears made huge changes, obviously with the coaching staff and Ben Johnson being brought in. And Eric, I've been telling, every week that we do a show and everybody else listens to me, I'm like, this is the first time the Bears have a head coach that, again, it's all going to be proven on the football field, but every time he talks, it makes sense. Like I'm not walking away with that, oh my God, that was cringe, or, whatever he says, and I've been crying for someone here to just to install a physical, offensive line and use the play action to help his young quarterback and build around the running game. And so far, that's what Ben Johnson's plan is here. So, everything I've heard has been great, in terms of the league, in terms of how the rest of the league is kind of, adapting and accepting Ben Johnson as the Bears head coach. What have you been hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I just hearing him in Indy and hearing, Dan Campbell talk about him and some of the assistants he brought with him too, and obviously spoke with some reverence. And, I just think back to like when Ben got the job. I mean, he wasn't, like the chosen one or whatever. I mean, it was, he had to prove himself. This was not some, I don't know, golden boy necessarily, even though he's got, the obviously well-spoken guy and, handsome dude with the blonde hair and all that. Like, from what I understand, like he was considered an up and coming coach, just like everybody else on a very hungry and talented staff. And, you can see why he's done well for himself, and some real imaginative stuff on offense, but also sticking to his priorities, running the football and, making sure he's firm up front and, noting what his quarterback can and can't do and trying to put him in the best situations. So, translating that, everything I've heard, since he's been here in Chicago has been pretty eye-opening too. And I think it reflects too. And, the idea that they've made some important additions to the offensive line and they could go into battle tomorrow, theoretically, with, pending Braxton Jones status, but like they're in decent shape and they're still talking about potentially adding offensive line help. So that, to me, says like, okay, I know Ryan Poles is obviously a big part of this too, but just saying the brain trust seems to get it, and that's a good sign for Bears fans.
And it's like right there. So at number 10, and that's something that would be talk about here a lot, as obviously is where do the Bears go now at number 10 with all the additions they made in the offensive line. And I think you might be there with me as well. You don't stop. You don't stop, fortifying the trenches, whether it's at tackle, whether it's at, defensive tackle or defensive end. So, having said that, the talk about Genty and even to a certain extent, Tyler Warren at tight end, I think those are some luxury picks that the Bears just can't afford to do right now. I think they still need to attack the offensive and defensive lines. And curious, if I think you have another mock draft coming up right before the draft, or are you done mocking?
I do. No, I'm not done yet. I'm
Okay.
already thinking about it, even though it's more than a week away. But it's
not to give away your pick,
a week from Monday. So draft week, a couple days ahead of the draft, and at that point, I if I have to make changes at that point, hey, it's too late anyway. So I got a little time to work on that one.
I don't want to give away your pick. I don't want to be a spoiler.
Yeah, no.
But in terms of do you still agree that the offense and defensive line should be their focus here with the number 10 pick, especially with number 10 pick, and then other picks like running back or tight end, or you can always they have two top half early second round picks as well, or I think pick number 75 in the third round as well. So do you agree that number 10 should be focused, depending on how the board falls, obviously, on the trenches?
Yeah, I think you just said the perfect conditional right there, depending on how the board falls. Obviously, I think we're kind of locked in. Let's just go 1 through 9 real quick. It seems like it's going to be Cam Ward, Travis Hunter. I think Abdul Carter. That could change, I suppose. The Giants technically don't need an edge, but obviously at that point, the Patriots would take him at 4 if not. Right. So I don't know who they're taking over him. Maybe Mason Graham, right? So basically you understand that the first 5 picks in some order are going to be Ward, Hunter, Carter. I would guess Will Campbell if the Patriots stayed there, and then maybe Mason Graham at 5. I wasn't sure about that Graham pick, but a lot of people seem almost locked in on that one, which scares me a little bit as a mock draft guy. But let's just say those are the first 4 or 5 picks. Maybe Membu goes 4th. I don't know, but you're waiting for the Raiders to make a decision. If they don't take Genty, and I know everyone's just putting it in there, I will say I did have one of the first Raiders Genty mocks out there. Just throwing that out there, and I got laughed at for it too, by the way. In January, it wasn't even that long ago. But if they go Jalen Walker, or they go another edge type player there, which would be totally understandable, right? We've just sort of conditioned ourselves to think that they're going to take the running back. Okay, that changes things, right? The Jets could certainly take an offensive lineman. They could take Warren. Those are 2 positions or 2 players that the Bears might consider. So, all of a sudden it's getting a little tight. Carolina's going to go D. D-line wouldn't be shocking. The Saints, again, a mystery team. Is it a quarterback? Is it a pass rusher? Is it a corner? Who knows with them? Right. So it's a little dicey all of a sudden. I'm not saying that there isn't going to be an edge player for him, or that, possibly one of those tackles could slide. If Genty's still there, maybe if he's the best guy, you say, yeah, is it maybe a little bit of a luxury? Yes. He's also a pretty darn good running back who could be amazing in this. And in my opinion, I'm not saying it should be the pick, but if you're going to add a superstar offensive type piece, potential superstar, this is the perfect guy to add with somebody like Caleb. I don't know Caleb's personality, but obviously just thinking about the quarterback and the dynamics of leadership and all that, from everything I've heard on Ashton Genty is that he does not seek the spotlight. He's a show up and go to work kind of guy, and that's okay with him. And he likes sort of just Khalil Mack was like that. Chicago's had plenty of those guys, but I mean, that would be ideal almost. Again, you could argue the positional value and all that, but so I think what you just said makes a lot of sense. O-line, D-line, edge, somewhere in that sphere. But I also couldn't rule out one of those other wild card picks just in case there is a little bit of a run on some of those lesser known picks.
So sticking to that area, and this is how I've broken it down, which because like you said, there are certain spots already you've heard that are kind of locked in, right? You talked about Graham at number 5 with the Jaguars, talked about Genty at number 6. I've even heard Jalen Walker number 8 with the Panthers, but it all differs, right? This is a lying season, so who knows who's telling what. But say you're the Bears and you come down now, you have a Michael Williams, you have maybe a Mason Graham, or you have a Will Campbell. I mean, at that point, if you're sitting there at the Bears and you're Ryan Poles and you're Ben Johnson, I think you've kind of got your pick of the litter there. I mean, you can get Michael Williams, who I am a huge fan of. I know he had a subpar season this year, but that he wasn't the same after that week 1 injury versus Clemson. And and in terms of Mason Graham, that's the one guy I want to talk to you about, because I think you and I are on the same page here with me. I think Graham will be a good player. Yeah, I think I'm worried he's already maxed out. Like this is the best he can be. And I actually, for the future, I think the ceiling in terms, I like his teammate Kenneth Grant in terms of potentially being a more dominant player, if you will, up front. So curious, I mean, 2 different type of body types, right? Mason's more of that 3 technique kind. Graham could be a nose tackle, a 1 technique, or maybe even a 3 technique. So like, Mason Graham, in terms of, his overall ceiling, do you see him as being Pro Bowl potential, very good starter? How do you see his ceiling there, potentially, if he's there for the Bears number 10?
Yeah, I could see him having like a Grady Jarrett like career, if we're going to use a Bears-ish example. I know he hasn't technically played for him yet, but like I could see him being the kind of guy who just finds his ways into backfields. He's sort of been bred for this. He went to one of those elite football high schools. He went to Michigan. He's been the center of attention. Yes, he did play with some pretty amazing D-line talent there, especially the last 2 years. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that he has like a superpower other than like block destruction, and which is obviously a crucial thing to have. But he's under 300 pounds. He's got shorter arms, and the 3 techniques who've had successful careers as penetrators and stuff tend to have a little bit more length, or elite quickness off the ball, or some kind of dominant trait. That's the one kind of thing that holds me back. In a normal draft, he would probably be my 8th or 10th overall player, which again, if he somehow makes it to Chicago, that's great. So I'm not trying to dog on him as a prospect, but I think the interesting debate would be like if it came down to like your 2 top edge rusher options were Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart, because then it would truly be both are athletically blessed. Michael's a little younger, a little less production, a little less, last season kind of got sort of wiped out, I guess, if you will. But, a guy who has all the kind of earmarks of something pretty special. I mean, I don't know. The age is very exciting. He doesn't turn 21 until I think end of July, early August, something like that. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And Dennis Allen likes his ends bigger too, so that factors in. You have some, you think about some of the guys he had in the past, and, they have to be able to hang out in the trenches and do the dirty work too. They're not just rushing the passer. So they're good on one side, but obviously could use another, but good on both sides from a size perspective. But you'd like to add somebody, I think, who adds a little more pass rush juice and could maybe be a 3rd down role year 1, and then eventually kind of get into that full-time status year 2, maybe if they're not already. So I would say, that would be a fascinating debate. I would guess they probably like Williams a little better, but that's just a guess.
The one player that really excites me, and I'm curious your take on this one, Eric, and I sit down, watch his tape, and for me, he's one of the more exciting defensive players in this draft. And that's Jalen Walker. And I know he doesn't fit the stereo.
From Kentucky?
No, it's Jalen Walker from Georgia.
Oh, I think you said Deion Walker. Sorry, I was getting a little worried there for a minute. Yeah, go ahead. Jalen Walker.
Yeah, and I mean, I know he's an edge player in an off-ball linebacker body, and I don't know that this is where Aldo and I had a conversation. I'm like, if you're Dennis Allen and or if I'm Ryan Poles, I go to Dennis Allen and say, listen, can you use this guy? How would you use him? You need to give me a plan, because the way he plays off the edge. It's not like he's 6'1", 243 pounds. He plays like he's 6'5", 270 pounds. And the force in his hands, the ability to bend to get around the edge there, the corner. And then just the tracking ability, the burst to close, even if you drop back in coverage, and he can spy these quarterbacks, these mobile, athletic quarterbacks. I mean, he just entices me. But again, that frame and the way he's built, I need if I'm Ryan Poles, I need my defensive coordinator to tell me that he's got a plan and he utilizes. Maybe he's a off-ball linebacker, first couple of first and second down, and then third down he lets him loose after the quarterback. Curious, if you're the Bears and then you're sitting there and Jalen Walker's there, do you pull the trigger? Do you think he's that high of a rated prospect as I do?
He's fascinating, and he's a great debate. I mean, I think you made a great point just now, which is that you have to say, what is he in our scheme? Because just listing him as an edge or a linebacker doesn't tell the whole story at all. When you watch the tape, what are the two things he does best? Like you said, rushing the passer with speed and force, and he comes in like a bullet. I mean, he comes in hot and heavy, right? You got to when you're 242 or whatever he is, with 6'1". I mean, that's the negative, right? But the other thing he did, I thought really well, was quarterback spy. I kept thinking, watching him, like, boy, if there's a division with a bunch of running quarterbacks, like this is the guy I would draft, because he closes fast. He takes really good angles to the ball. He's great moving forward. Right. Where I have a little question is moving backward. They simply didn't ask him to do it a lot. They had, obviously a really talented front seven, whatever. They would rotate and mix and match pieces and stuff. So it was hard to sometimes you get a little frustrated watching the tape because the guy would make, have a great first series and then he'd be out the second series. So that was true with a lot of Georgia guys in that unit. But yeah, I mean, just he's super cut. He's real finely tuned athlete, but there will be some limitations. He does get swallowed up at times as a rusher. And I think he would start out and be an excellent impact player on special teams, like kick blocker and things like that. And then third down rusher, possible QB spy. And then you teach him kind of the finer points of linebacker to see if he can get it. Or, is there a way to make him kind of that Micah Parsons style rusher, because I think Micah's instincts were further along, if we're going to just sort of put those two on the same, like we've done with Abdul Carter, but Jalen could be a really devastating player in time if he gets it.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's the thing. And then J2K who's a member of our chat here mentioned James Pierce, and J2K, for me, James Pierce, he's an outside linebacker. The 32-inch arms. He doesn't fit the prototype, and I understand. Neither does Jalen Walker, but Jalen Walker is a different type of breed. Than James Pierce. James Pierce does not really play the run very well, and again, he's more of a 2-point stance kind of player, and I just don't think he fits that scheme. And with Jalen Walker, you have to kind of make him a different kind of hybrid type of player, and that's why Allen would need to have some sort of plan for him. But those are the edge rushers. So we talked about the running back Genty, and I'm the proponent of you don't draft running back in the first round, especially when you have a deep running back class like this. Like, I mean, I can go third, fourth round, and I can find you some running backs here in this class. So for me, the guy I really have kind of earmarked for the Bears in the top of that second round is Quinshon Judkins. Now I know. Okay. He's been playing with, obviously with Ohio State with Travion Henderson, and they had that dual backfield. But I go back to his days at Ole Miss, and the way he was an instant sensation, as a freshman at in the SEC, where over 1,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, I think 15 touchdowns as a freshman. So for me, he's a guy, because I think Ben Johnson's already talked here about liking DeAndre Swift and what he does and what he brings. So if you're going to build that Sonic and Knuckles, if you will, from what they had in Detroit, I think. I think the Knuckles could be Quinshon Judkins, and he's just a physical, tough runner. And it looks like he kind of builds off of that physicality, kind of gets even more, goes off on physicality. Curious. I know you haven't rated, I think 54th overall, a little bit lower than where I had him, but yeah, I mean, I just love this kid. Yeah, I mean, I think he'd be perfect in that kind of role. And so the reason why he's 54th is that I don't know that he's a complete running back, but like you said, who cares if, like David Montgomery, has become an invaluable piece in Detroit for that very reason, right? He fills the complement to Gibbs. Together, they're better than one, right? And so I think a Judkins Swift combination would do exactly that. You're right. He runs
downhill with power, great in the red zone. You know, you could see that in late in the season too. You know, I mean, I think he, you know, like as an Ole Miss feature back, I somehow liked him less. Like, I mean, I like him more as that perfect sort of change of pace guy. And, you know, there were some games where he looked like the better running back than Travion Henderson. You know, you said, give him the ball more, right? You know, this 11 carry for 124-yard business. But, you know, other games he was kind of slowed down a little bit. I've heard some scouts question the kind of the run instincts and vision. Like it feels like he does sort of run up into the back of his blockers at times, but you know, and Montgomery does that too. Sometimes he's a little bit wild at, you know, when he's flailing and spinning and gyrating around. So, I mean, look, it's a little bit nitpicky. He would be a perfect second round back. I know the Bears have too. So depending on how that first pick goes, let's say it's defense, you swing back with a back or an offensive weapon of some kind. And then, you know, play it by ear for the pick 2 slots later. I mean, that could end up being really nice for them. But yeah, Judkins makes a lot of sense to me, I think, for exactly the reason you said.
Yeah, and the other position that gets a lot of talk here is tight end, obviously, at number 10. And Tyler Warren's the name that keeps popping up. And for me, you know, I've been scouting, you know, tight ends as a complement, right? I'm looking for players that are complements to a Cole Kmet, because I'm assuming Cole Kmet's your inline starting, you know, tight end.
Yep.
And guys like Colson Loveland, I think would be a great compliment. Mason Taylor would be a nice compliment. Even Elijah Arroyo from Miami would be a nice compliment to Cole Kmet. But for me, if they draft Tyler Warren at number 10, and we'll discuss, Alden, I will discuss this later on in the show, but to me, that kind of limits Cole Kmet's time on this roster. Curious, because I don't see Tyler Warren as a compliment to Cole Kmet. I see him as a eventual replacement for Cole Kmet. Curious your thoughts there.
Inline guy, right?
Yep.
That's exactly right. I agree. I don't think Warren's the pick. I've always felt like that was kind of a red herring, but you know, again, there's been enough talk about the possibility that I'd at least have, you know, I've had to consider it. It won't be the first name I think of when I get to the Bears pick, unless kind of that doomsday scenario unfolds where, you know, the Raiders go a slightly different direction. There's a run on defense, you know, or you know, the front 7 guys and the O-linemen get hoovered up. I mean, in that case, maybe you consider it, or you talk to the Colts at 14 and say, hey, Chris Ballard, you're on the hot seat. What do you give me to come up to 10? So there's ways to obviously get out of that if they need to. But yeah, I mean, I would see him more as that kind of, I'm not comparing him to Gronk, but like I called him a Gronk style tight end, in that, you know, he's a true inline guy, and I think that would be a redundancy in what they have. So yeah, to your point, I think there's enough guys who play more of the F or H or however you call it in your offense, but Mason Taylor would be a lot of fun. He's another young guy. I mean, man, there's one of the best things about this draft class is there's some really talented 20-year-olds currently who will be turning 21 soon, or maybe later this summer, who, you know, I think have a chance to be really special, but sometimes they don't pan out. So it really is tough. But Taylor looks like such a natural pass catching athlete. He would be that Sam Laporta in the offense, so to speak. And not saying you couldn't also, you know, use plenty of 12 personnel and get Kmet involved, but those two would complement each other, I think, a lot more. Or like you said, I think Elijah Arroyo could be that, you know, that red zone guy, jump ball guy, third down, you know, bring him in as a receiver, you know, kind of a compliment to Kmet.
I want to get to some of our questions here from the chat room. Let's start with the Tooch. He says, Eric, which players in this draft are worth trading up for on day one? It's a question that we've been talking a little bit about here at the Barroom. And frankly, the national media just over the last few days has been bringing up, you know, mock drafts and articles about the Bears potentially moving up to acquire Genty or even Abdul Carter. But let's focus on Tuch's question. Which players in this draft are worth trading up for on day one?
Yeah, so I would say that the two players that I would most heartily endorse trading up for would be Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. Whether those picks are available remains to be seen. I would think it would be a lot easier to get Carter at 3 than it would be, you know, and again, I have no indication that that's in the Bears' plans, just hypothetically.
Sure.
But, you know, there's a little bit of question about his health and testing and athleticism. We don't have numbers on him or Hunter for that matter. But it's sort of a new trend. We're having to, adjust. We don't see much of the top, a lot of the top guys will sidestep those things. If you trade up for Genty, let's just say hypothetically, we did just sort of talk about him a little. I won't go into depth, but you're doing it because you have pretty good intel that the Raiders are taking him at 6, and that the Patriots at 4, Jaguars at 5, either one will take a discount trade up. Because some teams will do that. If you plug it into the calculator, depending on which chart you use or whatever, you'll see some deals where teams overpay, little added tax, maybe for a quarterback, for a pass rush or something like that. And you'll see deals where some teams are desperate to move out and they want more picks, whatever. So I think New England would be open for business. That'd be a landing spot if they want to get there. But I think you would be doing it because you think he's special and, he's going to be our bowling ball guy. And, we'll give Swift the kind of the third down stuff. And I mean, again, this is just me sort of talking it out, and that you feel like the Raiders won't pass on him.
Right.
But as for whether he's worth trading up for, that's a different debate. I like Ashton Genty. I really do. I was on him last summer. I watched a ton of his games before, this past season. I put some clips up on Twitter, but like, I think I would have put a higher grade on Bijan Robinson coming out by like a hair. That's just, I mean, again, I think it would be a fascinating spot with Ben coming in and who they have on offense, but I don't know that he's LaDainian Tomlinson good, like some people have kind of suggested.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up on Abdul Carter. I haven't heard anything in terms of his foot. Have you heard anything else in terms of that foot injury?
No, in fact, that's a good question. I haven't called on that recently, so I don't have any information. But yeah, I mean, he was scheduled to be part of the Indy medical recheck, the combine recheck that's happening this coming weekend, I think. 2 weeks out. Yeah, I believe it's coming weekend off the top of my head. My brain's, fried at this point. But, and that's a big one. I mean, it's sort of, it goes under the radar every year, but there are, I think teams weren't sure on Cooper DeJean last year. And that's why he slipped a little bit, because of the medical stuff. He wasn't able to work out, and he was a top 20 prospect all day long. There was, I don't know, maybe I'm just, but the medical is unknown. So we've got guys like Josh Simmons at Ohio State. Maybe he's a second round pick. Maybe he's there when the Bears are picking at what is it, 39 or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really interesting players who could fall for various reasons. James Pierce, you guys mentioned earlier, some character stuff, I mean, interviews haven't really helped him. So, he could be available in the early to mid second round. And, there's a few other cases. Not every team is signed off on every single pass rusher. I won't get specific because I don't want to, but there are a few guys who are routinely being mocked pretty high in drafts that some teams won't touch. Now, that doesn't mean they won't get taken in the first round, but there's some that have that feeling. And so I think we're going to have a wild couple days. I think Thursday and Friday are going to be a lot of fun, even if it's not a typical type of draft.
Yeah.
Danny R. wants to know, Eric, your thoughts on Ohio State quarterback Will Howard.
He's an interesting one. I got to see him at Kansas State, prior to transferring to Ohio State. And it was funny because I was actually on my friend used to be Rivals. Now he's switched over to 247, the Missouri recruiting site. And so he and I have become pretty good friends over the last decade or so. And, I was reading some story he wrote, and people were talking about, well, Brady Cook's way better quarterback than Will Howard. And I'm thinking, I think this guy's pretty good. He's a K-State. Now, I didn't think he would be a high pick or anything like that, but I was intrigued. That's why people thought there's no way they upgraded over McCord, but he handled the pressure, had a couple rough moments along the way. The Michigan game was forgettable. But he got to the mountaintop, and you can't take that away from him. And he's got that kind of, that Josh Allen-y thing about him where he's a big kid who can run and has some arm talent, even if he hasn't fully been able to kind of unlock it yet. That seems weird coming off a national title game, but I don't think we've necessarily seen the best of him. But then he goes to the combine and has one of the worst throwing performances I think I've ever seen there. I mean, it was wild. And in person, I'm going. And again, it's like this much of his portfolio, but it still sticks in my head every time I think about him. But
missing, like, why? I mean, it was horrible misses. It wasn't just like a little bit here and there.
Weird. It was the ball was flying all over the place, but nobody made a big deal out of it because the dude played like 17 games or whatever. I mean, he had a long season. Was probably playing through some stuff, but he's the developmental guy that I'm probably most interested in, where he's probably going to go, which is end of round 3, early round 4, if I had to guess.
Yep, I think that's where you're right. Round 3 is probably where you're going to go. I got to ask you.
Yours is probably going to go earlier than people think too. By the way, just throwing that out there. Not a lot of people are in love with the guy, but I'm just saying there are some teams out there that might shoot their shot on him in round 3 or something.
Which one was that player?
Quinn Ewers.
Oh, Quinn Ewers. Yeah. Okay.
It's I think if he hadn't had the oblique injury last year, you might have seen a different quarterback. I can't say I love the guy, but consistency is really an issue. But yeah, I mean, Howard and him and Jalen Milroe, there's some wild cards in this group.
I got to ask you, your Missouri question, right? So there's a couple players, obviously Armand Membu, and what drives me crazy is these, talking heads talking about moving him to the left side. Armand Membu is a right side player. He's a right tackle, maybe even right guard, right? But so that's something that really sticks in my crawl. So, and the other thing is Luther Burden. Like, I thought coming into the season, he might have been the top receiver in this draft. And there's some character stuff about him now as well. I don't know if that's fake news or whatnot, but I just feel like he wasn't utilized to his max potential. I mean, he ran a limited route tree at Missouri.
Sure did.
So, curious, why do you think the drop for Luther Burden is this past season in Missouri?
Yeah. First on Membu, you're right. I think he's the right tackle. I think he's going to be a really nice player in this league. Moves really well. He's going to do very well for himself. Had you told me in August that he was going to be drafted ahead of Luther Burden, I think I would have splashed whatever I was drinking on my face. So yeah, I mean, I went into the season thinking low first round or mid first round. I didn't. First of all, I was impressed he ran a 4.4. Wasn't 100% sure he was 4.4 speed. Watching him, he kind of plays like a 4.5 guy. He likes to try to turn on the burners late at the top of his route and stuff, and I don't think he helps himself. He needs some help with a good, patient wide receiver coach he's got all the tools to get the best out of him, I think. He was predominantly a slot receiver. They didn't fully trust him to punt return. He would let him in high school. He used to let him hit the ground and catch him off the hop. And he had like 8 touchdowns his last year in high school. His freshman year, he caught one off the hop, ran it back for a touchdown. After that, everyone just started hitting him really high to him, and he didn't know how to catch him or you'd let him drop and just trickle, so catching punts is an issue. And, he's sort of Debo light. I mean, Debo Samuel-ish in a lot of ways. He's great in the backfield. You can use him on jet sweeps. He can do a lot of different things with the football. I think you could try him out wide too. He didn't get a lot of deep routes last year. He got one late against South Carolina. He got a couple late against Vanderbilt, but it was always out of like necessity. Texas A&M, once they were down 3 touchdowns.
Yeah,
it's just like, they're not playing deep safeties over the top on him on every play. And even if they are, why did you go get this guy if you're not going to try to jam it into him in key spots? So there were a few things going on. There may be some maturity stuff with him. I mean, what wide receiver isn't sort of an alpha personality and a little bit of a tricky guy to work with, but he shows up on game day. That's like when the lights are on, he's usually there to play. BC game, he kind of lost his cool a little bit with the personal foul, and just there you can kind of get in his head a little, but man, after the catch, yards after catch, tackle, contact balance, he's like a running back. I mean, he really is.
When the ball in his hands, yep.
Spin moves and all these things like B button, whatever you want to say. I mean, he's fun with the ball in his hands, but you got to get it to him, and he doesn't separate a lot.
Exactly. Stephen Degishi wants to know which edge rushers would fit in the Dennis Allen scheme. And I know Danny's been doing a little work and studying Dennis Allen's defenses. And Eric, I'm sure you have followed Dennis Allen as a head coach and defensive coordinator. Can you guys both share what you have learned about Dennis Allen, in particular with edge rushers and who might fit his scheme? Danny, why don't you start first?
Yeah, the guy I've been talking about all along, and the guy Eric and I just touched on earlier, is Michael Williams from Georgia. He likes long, athletic, lean, defensive ends. Guys with 34+ inch arm length and the ability to bend around the edge and also be able to play run defense. Because with Dennis Allen's defense, if you're defensive line, if you can't stop the run, you're not going to play many snaps with Dennis Allen. He doesn't put up with that stuff. So his edge guys got to be long and lean and be able to put up against the run. So that's why for me, Michael Williams would be that top guy that I think Dennis Allen would want there. If you're talking about pick number 10, first round, second, third round, there's other plays we could talk about, but pick number 10, it's got to be Michael Williams.
Yeah, I think he and Shamar Stewart fit the mold. And again, I know a lot of people are down on Stewart because of the production and stuff. Obviously, there've been some guys who've kind of taken that route before. Daniil Hunter would be one of them, who had, I think, 3 sacks in college or something like that. So, there are other examples too. But, I would say that Michael is maybe a little bit more enticing of an overall package, even if Shamar is going to be one of the best looking athletes in this class. So, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you look, he's had some guys who, I think he had Trey Hendrickson for a year maybe, and he had Cam Jordan, and they traded for Young. They had some big dudes, not just long, but also guys who carried their weight well. And obviously, it fits with Montez and stuff. But yeah, the long arm guys, let me just look at my list. I would say Landon Jackson's really interesting from Arkansas.
That's something I want to like him, Eric. But every time I put his tape on, he's getting blown off the football, and that's why I step back. I'm like, all right, because he had an awesome Senior Bowl game and week. And Jackson and then
I thought day one he got his kicked, and then day 2, 3, and then through the game I thought he looked really good after that. Yeah.
Right. And then that's the things I want to like him, but I just always think like he's the guy that he's that tweener for me, even though he's got the size, he's got the length. And but yeah, he's a guy, definitely a guy I like a lot is maybe a second round is Nick Scorton, the kid from Texas A&M, former Purdue guy. A guy that can do a little bit of both, right? He can stand up from a 2-point stance, rush from there, put his hand on the ground, and even though he's got 33-inch arms, he does play a physical brand of football. He's got that pass rush, technique down. I think he got maybe in the second round you can look at there as well.
He played too heavy last year, I thought, guys, and just he bulked up into that 280-pound range. He just didn't wear it well. It just wasn't perfect. So he slimmed down. He's going to play in that kind of 260 to 265 range. So he makes a lot of sense. I would say that was, looking back, it was probably a mistake for him, but he's a heavy-handed guy. He's got some bursts. I think he could play on his feet a little bit too. And his Purdue tape was exciting, and you hoped that the whole group would dominate more than it did last year. But they're all good football players individually, and I think there's a good chance that Turner works out. I think he's a good player too. So yeah, Nick did what he had to do to go there. You thought it made a lot of sense, but his best football might have been in 23.
All right. And then the one guy that no one talks about here, and I think maybe he more is in day 2, maybe early day 3, is Ohio State's JT, and I'm going to butcher his last name, but Tuimoloau. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Tuimoloau. You got me
Don't ask me.
Tuimoloau. Yeah, that's it, right? Yeah.
All right. I'm going to call him JT.
Some guys say it so well, and I'm like, I'm usually pretty good with the Polynesian names, but this one always trips me up. Yeah.
But, we talk about Jack Sawyer, talk about obviously Williams, the kid inside, and but this kid, obviously he's not super bendy. He's not, twitchy out edge guy. But he's a power guy with a nonstop motor. Had a great year last year, 12.5 sacks, a very under the radar kind of year with 12.5 sacks, 22 tackles for loss. but he's a guy that beats you with effort and energy. And again, not a day one guy, and maybe not even a day two guy, who knows, but definitely a guy you can bring in and be part of your rotation. And man, if you give him a pass rush arsenal, I think that guy could be something you could talk about years down the road and say, hey, we stole him in the third or fourth round.
I love the guy. I think he's got limitations, to your point, which is that, I mean, if he gets sacks, it's usually going to be because of effort and second effort and technique and things like that. But what's wrong with that? You know,
Right.
like Jack Sawyer's the same way too, a different type of player. But I mean, like, I'm with you. But neither guy is super twitchy or bendy. They're not that type of guys. They are physical, edge setting, forceful pass rushers. And all those sacks, the reason it was such a quiet season, they all came in the playoff games. They all came at the end of the year. He got hurt in the national title game, did come back, but leading up to that game, he and Donovan Jackson might have been, their sort of secret MVPs of that team. So really, he had a breakout game against Penn State 2 years ago, and everybody thought, oh my God, this guy's a future top 5 pick, and he's this freaky guy. He had like the fumble return for a touchdown and 2.5 sacks. I forget what else. He had one of those crazy stat games for an edge, but I think a lot of people were disappointed that he didn't have better production. But if you watch the tape, he's all over the place, integral guy for their defense. I think, with what's his name in New England? I can't think of Vrabel, his connections, Ohio State. He's getting one of those guys. He is getting one of those JTT or Sawyer or something like that, just because they play his brand of football and they could use an edge rusher in New England. But I would absolutely say he makes sense for Chicago, as long as you don't have him like standing up, dropping into zones and that kind of stuff. I don't think that's where he's best.
We talked about Allen liking length, liking some physicality at the defensive end position.
He's got like 35-inch arms.
Yeah, JT will give you that. And the one thing I got to tip my hat to Ohio State guys, they play hard. All those guys up front play hard, and they don't take a snap off. Even Tyreek Williams. I think if he can get a pass rush repertoire, you're talking about a guy that could be a 3 technique. He's already good against the run. I mean, just add a pass rush repertoire to him, and you talk about another guy that could be pretty impactful at the next level. So hats off to Ohio State guys.
Yep. Yeah, he had an injury during his 40 at the pro day, but he got hurt about like 25 yards of the 40, right? And so I looked and they had a 10 and a 20 split for him. Both of them were good times. I mean, he's a big Tyreek Williams is a big dude. Yeah. And he ran like a 1.78 and a 2.78, I want to say, something like that. But I mean, like if people slip on this guy, I think he could, like you said, end up being a monster in a couple of years.
Got one more for you. Actually, I got 2, but they should be quickies. Bob Ward wants to know, the tight end is a very compelling position. We have a coach that knows what to do with 2 on the field. What can tight end Mason Taylor do that others cannot in this draft? I know Danny will want to weigh in on that too.
I'll just say, like, he can run. I mean, he can move. He's really nifty. He's great on the sideline. He made a great catch in the Senior Bowl practices on the right sideline, I guess, towards the press box, and great body control. I mean, maybe Colston Loveland's a little bit more polished as a receiver right now, and I admire Loveland just for working with Michigan's quarterbacks last year and still being productive. Is amazing. But
that was so frustrating tape to watch there, Eric.
It really was. It was like watching Laporta at Iowa, honestly.
Yeah.
You'd sit there and be like, please throw him the ball. It's just like
he's wide open.
Exactly. And you just like it. And again, it's like 2 middle-aged guys sitting at home complaining about this. But yes, when you're in the thick of draft watching season and you have one of these guys that is really talented, but they're just never getting the ball, it really
that is.
But yeah, no, he's super young. I think he gives a crap as a blocker, which I appreciate. He's not there yet, but he cares. He's going to be 21 years old. He's got Hall of Fame bloodlines, with Jason Taylor. I mean, from his first college game, he looked like he belonged, and he's an interesting guy for sure. I think he'll take a little while. I don't think he's going to be instant coffee, but he'll develop for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I've said before, he's a natural pass catcher, a good route runner. Ran a 4.640 at his pro day. So I think like Eric mentioned, he's not there as a blocker. He'll give effort, but he's not there, and that's why I saw him as one of the nice compliments to a Cole Kmet, right? He'll be the guy you can flex out on the slot and give you another additional, pass catcher out of there. So I think that everything's natural with him, just a smooth pass catcher. Everything just looks smooth and easy, with him. He never fights the ball off. And even when he ran the gauntlet at the combine, one of the better gauntlets I've seen run by receivers or tight ends. So just a natural,
loose hips. Yep. He's a natural. Yep.
Our last one goes out to Foster Covers, and every show we have at least one question about a fairly obscure player, and this is tonight's winner. Comes from Foster.
Oh, man.
If Eric has any thoughts on Irv Mulligan, the running back at Jackson State.
I haven't watched him. I'm going to try to see if I can do this while we're talking. That's a deep dive. I appreciate it, though.
I haven't even watched him.
I have not watched him, Irv Mulligan. That's do I get a mulligan on this one? For not watching
get a mulligan on Mulligan.
That's
yes.
So I had a guy actually pass on some HBCU notes to me. So I'm going to see if I can quickly try to find him, and we'll see if I can do this while we talk here. But no, I thought it was great. Hold on, I'm looking right now.
I've been trying to get some tape of that Arizona kid. He was
at Jackson McCourkey or whatever.
Yeah.
He
was at the
his
Shrine game.
Shrine Bowl was really helped him. Yeah, I mean, I cleared off all my 2023 tape. I can get to it. It's on a different drive, so I'll have to. But this kid looks like he had some decent workouts here. I don't have a scouting report on him, but 5'9", 199 pounds at his pro day, ran a 4.53, 36-inch vertical, 10.9 broad. So yeah, I'll have to. I'm gonna watch him. I'm gonna find some Jackson State tape. I have some games, and I'll try to report back to you guys.
He ran for almost 1,300 yards last year, 6 yards a clip, 13 touchdowns, and not a prolific pass receiver, but he did catch 3 passes for about 40 yards.
Well, my first question is why didn't Coach Prime take him with him to Colorado?
Yeah, good question. Maybe yeah. We'd have to have been. Maybe he transferred in. I don't know enough about old Irv's work.
Well, he looks destined to be a free agent in this. I doubt that he'll be drafted. Right. But we never know with this game called the NFL Draft. Eric, you are sensational as always. The reaction to your appearance here is very positive from people in the chat.
That's very nice.
With the exception of one Detroit Lions fan who I had to kick out of our chat room, out of our barroom, so to speak. He thought that we talked too much about the Bears and not the Lions.
the Bears.
I know. This is hard for a Lions fan. They get a little bit of the sliver of the national attention, and now they're letting it go to their heads.
That's right.
This is the problem. And they're seeing Ben go elsewhere. They're going to have to face him twice a year. That's going to be rough, I imagine.
Yep. And it does look like Ben is not going to shy away from some smack talk. He took on Matt LaFleur a couple of times, and I bet you Detroit week is going to be fun. He's going to talk a little smack, and Dan Campbell will probably talk it back. It's going to be a fun NFL season just because of Ben Johnson's presence.
I mean, look, I as a journalist and as somebody who doesn't care whether the Bears go 0-17 or 17-0, I'll always take a brash young coach coming into the league. I mean, when Rex Ryan came into the league, it was fun, man.
Yes.
I mean, those first couple years were entertaining. Got a little old after a while, but I'm not saying he's going to be that, but maybe a little bit more of a cosmopolitan edge to him or something like
Absolutely.
that. But Ben has an
Even
edge.
Jim Harbaugh. When Jim Harbaugh first came to the 49ers.
Great example. It's always more interesting. And now Pete Carroll's back in the division. Ooh, man.
Yeah. Well, just for our audience, again, Eric's top 100 NFL draft prospects 2.0 is available now on NFL.com. Eric, anything else you want to plug while you're here?
That's it, man. Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun draft. Again, I like when things are a little bit unpredictable and unexpected. I think we're going to have some of that in this draft. Maybe it'll be a little underwhelming in some regards, but I think there'll be some real surprises. Again, some of the teams that take quarterbacks and where those quarterbacks go will be the non-Bears headline for you guys to keep an eye on.
Very good. Thank you very much for being on, and we'll catch up with you later in the year, okay?
I got to work on Irv Mulligan. I'll see you guys later. See you, fellas.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Eric Edholm is the man, the man. Danny, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a 100-second break. I was trying to find something to play during that 100 seconds so we could take a break, you and I. So what I dug up was an old clip of Greg Gabriel talking about blocking. It's an old promo. I think it's from 2021 when I was down at the Senior Bowl. You were at the Shrine Bowl game, and I'm looking for it now, so that's why I'm talking crap here.
Said, you never.
That's the wrong one. But I'm going to play that. You and I will take a 100-second break, and we'll be back to talk about a number of topics, including some of the Bears press conferences from this week. Okay?
Sounds good.
Captured some video of Blake Freeland, the BYU mammoth offensive tackle. We're going to be talking about him in a future show. But I wanted to show you this video and have you kind of break it down for me. What is going on here? We've got one of the coaches from the All-Star team teaching him about hand use. Do you know exactly what he is telling him? And I kicked myself that I didn't go up to Blake and ask him, what did you learn there?
Well, okay. He's the coach who's on the right is really teaching him how the proper use of the punch, where he should place it, but what the defensive lineman is also going to do. You know how he's slapping the hands down? Right. Yeah, so you got to have strength in your arms, and you got to have power in that punch. You know, when we're grading offensive linemen, that's one of the first things you look at is, you know, first of all, how he comes up. Is he coming up like this from the inside? Is he hitting? You want him hitting right in here, not out here, but he's got to have some jolt. He's got to have some power to that punch, because, and then what the coach is explaining to him is that one of the first things a defensive lineman is going to do is try to slap his hands out of the way. And if you don't have strong arms, that can happen easily.
A blast from the past. Greg Gabriel talking football. And again, he is still around here on the Barroom Network every Monday morning, late morning. He and I talk about the draft. And this Monday, we're going to have a special guest. Dane Brugler is going to join Greg for 30 minutes of football talk. That's Monday at about 11:30 Central Time. And Danny, I'm working on a special guest for us for next Wednesday's show. Before we talk NFL draft, I'd like to talk a little bit about the press conferences that we had this week. I got about 2 or 3 clips that I'd love to get your reaction for. The first one is, we were just talking about defense a few minutes ago, and this is Jalen Johnson talking about how he is looking forward to playing more man-on-man defense.
You lock up the number one guy, number one on number one. So, I mean, for me, that's what I'm looking forward to doing. That's what I look forward for the most. That's what I train for. That's what I work hard for. So, I mean, for me, it's just going to be about that, being ready to go out there and lock up, challenge guys, make things hard on the offense, mess up timing, and then shoot the dogs up front. They got to eat. So, I mean, everybody just do what they do best. Dogs eat, and then the guys on the back end we cover.
Now, he loves doing that, but is he good at it, or is he better as a zone defender? What are your thoughts?
No, coming out of Utah, Jalen Johnson, his specialty was getting, you know, up there, press man coverage, being able to play, you know, some bump and run, some man coverage there. You know, so I think he can do it. Obviously, you know, he did well in terms of, you know, playing some of that cover 2 stuff that he was under here with the previous regimes. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something where Jalen Johnson, you know, I think I think Tyreek Stevenson, you know, like, you know, when coming from a couple of drafts ago, you remember, if you guys, the whole rankings, I had Terrell Smith rated higher than Tyreek Stevenson because of the Bears' needs, because of the Bears' scheme. Terrell Smith for me was a better zone cover, and I think Stevenson was more of a press, you know, man cover guy. Obviously, you know, they picked Stevenson first, and I think he now will be playing in a system that's more conducive to his strengths. So I think Tyreek Stevenson can also take a jump up here. And not to mention they've added Al Harris, who I think is one of the better defensive back coaches in the entire NFL. So yeah, I think, Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson and whoever else they have in that defensive secondary, I think they're all going to be better and more aggressive here under Dennis Allen. And that's the one thing they talked about is not only do they want to be aggressive at the line of scrimmage, but also want to be able to be aggressive at the line of scrimmage and the outside with the receivers and being able to kind of stop them from getting to their spots. And obviously a lot of this NFL offenses are rhythm and timing offenses. Obviously, if you jam the receiver and stop him from getting to his spot when the quarterback wants him there, that gives you opportunities to have the quarterback hold the ball, get sacks, or maybe even release the ball, expecting the receiver to be there. You jam them. Next thing you know, there's an interception opportunity. So I think that's all goes hand in hand with what Dennis Allen's going to bring in terms of this new defensive philosophy, if you will.
And J2K adds, yep, Stevenson is playing closer to what he likes to play. So your evaluation of the Bears defensive back crop as it stands now, and whether, they're ready to take that step to play more man-to-man.
Yeah.
Overall assessment.
No, I do. And I think that's something that they're going to go ahead and be able to do better at here. I think obviously John Johnson and talk about Stevenson. I think even Kyler Gordon, for out of the slot, I think he's a guy that could also get up there and get physical with those slot corners and be a little more, press at the line of scrimmage as well. So, the fourth corner, could be up for grabs. So we'll see what they do here. I'm not sure if they'll address it via veteran free agency or if they'll address it in the draft. Obviously, with limited picks, after the first, 4 picks, the first 3 rounds, they have, I believe, what is it? 1, 2, 3 picks after that, 1 in the 5th and 2 in the 7th. So,
right.
Unless they, trading down from 10, if that presents an opportunity to get more draft capital, now you can attack more needs there as well. So we'll see how happens there. But that's definitely another area where they can, look at, later on in the draft. I don't think they go corner early on in the draft just because I think they have more pressing needs. But I think, something if they get extra picks or maybe one of those, later on picks, they can go in and bring in one other corner. And also, they also could, hit the veteran free agency market after the draft. As we know, a lot of teams, cut some veterans after they've already filled their spots via the draft. So we'll see what happens, what shakes out there too.
Dizzle Joe wants to know if you got your merchandise shop up yet for Shimon Draft Scout T-shirts and hats and stuff. You got your?
I don't have it up there yet, this Joe. But I mean, if there's a call for it or if there's a need, I definitely will get some up there for you guys.
You got 2 people, so we're going to build on that. I love it. All right, so let me play another one for you here from the press conferences. This was Caleb talking about his meeting with Ben Johnson.
He said, you never forget your first day as a head coach, and he said it's a great day, and let's get this thing rolling. He jumped out there and said a bunch of do's, said a bunch of don'ts, said a president of what we're going to be like as a team, finding our identity and all of that. So we're excited. Obviously, we have to put in the work. Can't be too excited because the work hasn't been done, but definitely excited for what's to come and the future.
What's your level of confidence, Danny, that this could be the year, his sophomore season, that he just breaks through the glass and that we feel confident that he is going to be a tier 1 quarterback? What's your level of confidence right now?
I don't want to put that much pressure on him. Obviously, number 1 overall pick, and everyone expects great things out of him, but it's a new staff. It's a whole new way of learning. We talked about, there's a big deal made out of him, getting under center. And I don't think that's a big deal. I think that's, if you're a quarterback, you want to be successful in this league, you're going to have to play under center. Now, I think what Ben Johnson said, from day one is that he's going to build this offense around Caleb. So, Ben Johnson is big on play action, big on his quarterback under center. But if he sees Caleb is struggling early on with being under center for whatever reason, I think you can see Ben Johnson then adjusting his offense, and I think he will rely heavily on the run game. That's why I think the running backs and the tight ends in his offense are going to be huge, and I think the offensive line kind of can continue to fortify some more some depth, if you will, and maybe some protection for left tackle. I think those are still areas that they're going to kind of look at and concentrate on. But yeah, I think what Ben Johnson, at least, what I hope he's going to do is going to go and just kind of bring Caleb along, right? It's a whole new way of him to kind of look at the offensive scheme. It's a whole new system, obviously, a whole new way of calling the plays. My thing is, like, I want to see how Caleb calls the plays in the huddle. Does he get on that one knee and kind of look up at his teammates and bark out the commands? Is he standing up face to face? All these things, that might be like who cares about that? But these matter because the way you communicate, the way you project the play, the way you show your teammates, hey, yeah, I got this. I'm in command. I'm good. You just give me the time, or your receivers, you get to your spots. I got you. I'll get you the ball. And I think once he gets more comfortable in that, and once he gets, the confidence grows within Caleb, I think then you'll see that offense take off. So, all I want to see with Caleb is with the Bears in general on offense. I want to see an effective, efficient offense. I'm not saying I expect him to go out there and put 40 points a game next year, but just go out there and be efficient. None of this clunker stuff where we see offensive linemen on their butts as soon as the ball snapped and receivers running the wrong routes, or Caleb kind of holding on to the football. You want to see an efficient rhythm offense. Ball's out of Caleb's hands, or he knows where he's going with the football. As soon as the ball is snapped. So once we see that, and I think they'll just kind of build on that slowly but surely. And I think then you'll see Caleb eventually blossom.
I got a soundbite from Darnell Wright, who I'm going to be honest with. He's not comfortable talking in front of the media. Right. He admitted that, and he didn't, he didn't inspire a lot of confidence, but who cares?
He said he's nervous. He was nervous.
So I appreciate that. When I was his age, I was nervous to talk in front of the public too. So I can relate to that.
I can't ever see you being nervous talking.
Oh my gosh. I'll share stories with you at a future date. Trust me. Anyway, this is Darnell Wright responding to the question about the comparisons to him and Detroit Lions right tackle and Pro Bowler Penei Sewell.
What's your reaction to hearing, your name compared to, as you said, like one of the greater players in this league?
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm fortunate. They think highly of me, and hopefully I can live up to that. Because like I said, he's a really, really good player, and I try to, emulate some of his stuff.
Has there been any talk in the offseason? I know that none of these coaches have gotten to work with any of the offensive line yet, but are you going to stay at right tackle? Has there been any talk about you moving over to left at some point?
Well, they said I was going to quarterback, but no. We're really just training right now, just putting the groundwork in, so there's really no talk of anything.
Seems like a super nice guy.
I don't get why everyone wants to move these guys from the right side to the left side. It's like they don't understand how difficult of a jump it is. If you haven't done it, if not, I understand Darnell has some experience at Tennessee playing the left side.
Yes, he
but
does.
Let's let him master the right side for him. He's not a great right tackle, right? I mean, he's not. He doesn't play at Penei Sewell's level, right? Let's let him get comfortable there. Let him be good there before you talk to moving him to the left side. So this stuff drives me crazy sometimes, and I don't know. It lost me there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Darnell Wright, I mean, he's a guy that obviously Ben Johnson highlighted, early on in the process in terms of some of the things he does at the offensive line kind of reminds him of Penei Sewell, because of the size, the athletic ability, so on and so forth. So I think one of the better thing with Darnell Wright is seeing him out in space, similar to Penei Sewell when he's out there in the open field and he's kind of like that lead blocker when he's got got running backs behind him. I think that's where you see some of that comparison there with a Penei Sewell, their ability in the open field and be that lead blocker. So let's see how he develops this year and hopefully solidifies and fortifies that right side, right tackle position, and then we'll move forward.
That sounds like the plan. And with 3 new interior offensive linemen, do you really want to move your right tackle now to the left tackle? And then who knows what's going to happen then to replace the right tackle? Or you're going to have a rookie there. So, yeah, it's very complicated. I hope that discussion is not happening at Hallis Hall. All right, so let me see if I got one more here. I thought I did. I guess I don't. But I do want to get to the topic that you briefly touched on with Eric Edholm, and that is the whole tight end situation. Could we be looking at one more year of Cole Kmet as the Bears' #1 tight end? Talk to me about your concern or theory here.
Yeah, and then this is one thing that's kind of built up during off season, and I know we've touched on it here a little bit, a couple of times, although, but like this whole like it seems like everyone's down on Cole Kmet. Now I know he had an off year last year. He only had 47 receptions for 474 yards and 4 touchdowns, but again, he's a guy that, remember, a couple of years ago, actually 2 years ago, he had 719 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. The year before that, he had 7 touchdowns. So this is a guy that up until last year, we've seen him kind of progress and get better and better. And so I don't know if the expectations were getting to the point where, they expected Kmet to take the next step last year, and then all of a sudden they had a kind of a down year. But we got to remember, guys, last year's offense was just a mess from top to bottom. So we can't really pin that on Cole Kmet. Now, I am expecting a bounce back season from Cole Kmet this year. But what got me thinking about this is if the Bears do go in at 2 weeks from tomorrow in first round and say at number 10, make Tyler Warren that pick at number 10. That doesn't tell me, because I've been scouting tight ends looking for a compliment to Cole Kmet, because Cole Kmet's always been my starter, my inline Y tight end. And I've been looking for a compliment guy to go from there, right? So, but if they go ahead and make the pick at number 10 at Tyler Warren, he's not coming here to compliment Cole Kmet. He's coming here to replace Cole Kmet. So I think that's something I'm going to be looking at in 2 weeks from tomorrow in round 1. If Tyler Warren is out there and they bring him in, I think he's a guy that's going to say, Cole Kmet, your time on this roster is limited. Maybe one more season, or maybe they might jettison him off this offseason. Who knows? But I think that's something to keep an eye on. If that's the selection, number 10, Tyler Warren, that means Cole Kmet's not going to be here for much longer, and that's my opinion.
That's a great thought. I had not even considered that, but it definitely makes sense. Now, J2K says, I still like Loveland over Warren. Are you in agreement?
As a compliment, yes.
As a compliment.
Okay, I'm with you. As a compliment to Cole Kmet, I think Loveland is a perfect compliment. 6'6", 248 pounds. We talked about it with Eric Edholm. His tape was so frustrating, not because of him, but because of the quarterback play he had in Michigan. There were times he was running wide open routes, and the quarterback doesn't even look his ways. And this guy's 6'6", 248 pounds. You can't miss him down there with the big catch radius as well. And he's a really athletic tight end. He can get out in space, and he's a guy that can go up and make contested catches over defenders. So I think like pairing him with the Cole Kmet, and now you have, in my opinion, a really fascinating dynamic combination there at tight end. Add that with a Roma Dunze, with a DJ Moore, and then the running back again in the second round. I think now you got the makings of a really dynamic offense here. So, and even with the Mason Taylor, Taylor 6'5", I think Loveland 6'6", Taylor 6'5", but both are just and Taylor's more of a natural pass catcher, again, natural hands. He's not that big go up and get it kind of guy like a Loveland is, but still both are be great compliments to a Cole Kmet. But Tyler Warren, he's an inline tight end. He's a blocking tight end, and a guy that could be just like a Cole Kmet, right? So that's why he's not the perfect complement. He's more of a replacement, in my opinion. So that's why I was like, this is going to be curious to see what happens here, because that will tell me a great deal about the future of Cole Kmet in terms of that pick, what they use there.
All right, very good. Let's talk a little bit about 2 speedy linebackers that one of them is actually visited at Hallis Hall as part of the top 30 visits. And I'm kind of fixated on this Bears looking for a faster linebacker to succeed Sanborn and to potentially be a successor to either Edmonds or Edwards. So let's talk about Danny Stutzman, who let me look at this real quick here. Danny Stutzman ran the 40 in
a 4.52 40 with a 1.55 10-yard split. So
excellent. So tell me about it.
Yeah, so Stutzman is a guy, a 6'3", 233, 32 and a 1/8 arm length, 9-inch hands, like you said about the 40. Former 4-star high school recruit out of Florida, a 3-year starter at Oklahoma. This is a guy, he led the Big 12 in tackles in 2022 with 125 tackles. So to me, he's a consensus All-American in 2024. So he's an instinctive. He's like that throwback linebacker, middle linebacker. He has the neck roll, so he's got that look about him. He's really just an instinctive linebacker. He's a guy that we talked about the size, right? He's a guy that looks to quickly diagnose and key post snap, and then he can scrape over the top and come and fit in the gap. Downhill, aggressive. Again, more of a tackle to tackle box kind of linebacker. Just kind of looking at him, his overall body of work. There's a lot of things athletically. It's, for me, he's not a great scheme fit here. Now he's a good straight line athlete, meaning he can run forward, and when he comes downhill, he comes in aggressively. But the change of direction stuff is not there. He's a guy that gets stuck on his blocks a lot as well. Being able to show some lower body stiffness as well. So I think he's not, and so that means in coverage wise, when he drops back in coverage, he's not an ideal fit. And we talked about Dennis Allen likes to use two linebackers, likes to do a lot of use linebackers that can make sideline plays, can also drop back in coverage, but also can be stout at the point of attack as well. So I just don't think Stutzman is a ideal fit for the scheme. So that's why for me, it's a guy that I really wasn't looking at, and I know you mentioned it. So I'm like, I looked at, I ran the report on him, but it's just not the ideal fit for me with Stutzman.
Okay, so let's talk about Nick Martin, another speedy linebacker. He has a T30 visit, or I think it's already been done. And as you talk about him, I've got some video of him at the bench press and running his 40 at the combine.
Yeah, now Nick Martin, athletically, he fits this scheme, right? He's a guy, not as big as Stutzman, 5'11 and a half, 221. Shorter arms, but 4.5, 340. So their times are similar there. 1.54 10-yard split, 38-inch vertical, 26 reps on the bench. We saw the video there of him. A 2-year starter, a team captain in 2023. This is a guy that had a huge 2023 season. Where he led the Big 12 with 140 tackles. Also had 16 tackles for loss. So he's comfortable around the line of scrimmage. This past year really was injury marked, only played 5 games, missed 7 due to a right knee injury. So his stats were down a little bit, but you put on his tape, if I could make a perfect linebacker for this scheme, I would take Stutzman's frame, right, his size and his instincts, and combine them with the athleticism of a Nick Martin. And Martin, in terms of athleticism, he's got that quick twitch, he's got that closing burst to be able to make plays all over the field. He's got sideline playmaking ability, but his instincts aren't there yet. His eyes aren't there yet. You'll see him kind of misread and overrun the play, and then next thing you know, that the running back's got a gaping hole to the backside, and he cuts back in that way as well. But what Martin also does is he gives you some edge rushing as well, rushing from a 2-point stance, has that nice bend to be able to get underneath the tackle's pad level and come around the corner and bring some pressure there as a blitzer as well. So two different types of linebackers. I think Stutzman, for me, when I project him at the next level, he's an inside linebacker, more of like a 3-4 middle linebacker for me. That's where I see him. Whereas Martin, I think, can play in the scheme, but his instincts, he's got to be coached up. He's got the athletic ability, but he's got to be coached up. So I think if you get a Nick Martin here, he's a guy that can make his first couple seasons on special teams, and then eventually when he gets coached up, you can see a guy that can come on and make some impact plays. But yeah, Martin, sideline, can drop back in coverage, got this quick feet, he's got tremendous lateral agility, movement skills, and like I said, even gives you some off the edge kind of pass rush ability too. So for me, if you ask me to pick between these two for this scheme, it'll be Nick Martin over Stutzman.
All right. I asked you earlier today if you could be prepared to talk a little bit about Jordan Birch, and I know you talked about him on one of our other shows weeks ago, but I brought him up again because as I was looking at Dane Brugler's The Beast, he sort of is the kind of guy who could potentially be a big-time contributor to a defense as a middle round draft pick, a third rounder. We don't have a fourth rounder this year. Perhaps we'll acquire one, but it's one of those mid-round guys. So I got some video of Birch here that we could look at as you talk a little bit about his attributes.
Yeah, Birch is a guy who played his first 3 seasons at South Carolina, transferred to Oregon, played there the last couple of seasons. He's a guy that, to me, in 2023, I think had a really good year at Oregon, where he had 8 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. This past year came back and cultivated that with 11 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. I think you're right, Aldo. He's a guy that fits the profile. He's a twitchy edge guy. He's got 6'4", 279, 33-inch arms. So he's not the ideal fit, but he's a guy that I think could be someone that could rush from a 2-point stance, could put his hand in the ground, rush from a 3-point stance. You've even seen him at Oregon, could kick inside the defensive tackles in certain situations there as well. But yeah, he's a guy that I think could fit this scheme and could be one of those, mid, day 3 guys that you can, bring in here and put in initially part of a rotation or help develop and bring him further along here. But, in terms of why he's not a day 1, day 2 guy for me, I just saw some inconsistencies on his tape, in terms of effort. And sometimes I even saw, a lack of, a hustle in my opinion. But then you see stuff like this where we're playing right now where, he's piercing the gap and he's getting upfield and he's making tackles for loss. So, just the consistency wasn't there for me. And then again, more of a tweener type, in terms of doesn't have the ideal length, but also isn't a small enough to be a 3-4 outside linebacker. So I think, but he fits. He's a guy you can bring in here and use that athleticism, use that quick twitch, his first step upfield to get after the quarterback. And again, someone who needs time to develop. I'm not sure how much of an impact he'll have, in the first year, but definitely a guy you can put in a pipeline and eventually just, set him loose out there on the quarterback. But yeah, definitely a guy I've had my eye on for a couple of seasons now. And if they get him in you mentioned no 4th round pick, but if they get him in that, day 3 area, I think that'll be a heck of a prospect, with huge upside.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. J2K is moving us to the defensive tackle position. He's got a thought on Norman Lott. He says he's getting a lot of hype as a top 5 defensive tackle. And J2K wants to know, is he too one-dimensional as a pass rusher? He's got also that top 30 visit at Hallis Hall, so the Bears have shown some interest.
Yeah, I did Norman Lott as well. I believe he came in about 6'3", 6'4", if I'm not mistaken there. I have his numbers here somewhere. But, yeah, definitely a guy that more of that 3 technique kind of guy. Was a guy that kind of, if you put on Tennessee's tape, and I've studied, obviously, James Pierce, I've studied some of the other defensive players. He's a guy that's always in there, and he's got brings some physicality there as well. But yeah, I definitely like him as a day 3 guy too, a guy that can bring in some physicality and also give you some of that twitch you want up front with that in that 3 technique. But yeah, definitely an interesting guy. I saw that he's coming in for a visit. I think that fits. I don't have his numbers here in front of me. I in terms of his length and what he tested at, but definitely fits that profile as a 3 technique for me.
Okay, we'll do some more work on him and maybe talk about him in one of our upcoming shows. Wanted to also get back to the offensive line because we talked about not moving Darnell Wright from the right side. And when Ryan Poles met with the media, he talked a little bit about the left tackle position. This is what he said. I believe it was to the guys over at CHGO.
Yeah, no, he's busting his butt in rehab.
And he's reacting to a question about Braxton Jones and his rehabilitation.
Yeah, no, he's busting his butt in rehab. See him in the building all the time, trying to get back. And our training staff has been outstanding with that as well. So I'm confident he's going to get back and back to form. But that's definitely a situation when you look at the draft and as we move forward, to bring another tackle is definitely something that we would consider to do. But I'm also excited about Karan and his development. So it is a little bit of puts us in a pickle.
Puts us in a pickle, Danny. I thought that was an interesting use of words. And perhaps what he is saying, Braxton is not going to get the full rehabilitation approach to really work on the problem that he has, which is anchoring. And Karan is a big unknown. And so do we draft a left tackle early? That's the pickle he's referring to. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I heard that as well. And I was all right, put you in a pickle. So meaning what? Meaning in terms of, do you draft at the position? Do you now have Karan come in as they take a number 1 rep, since Braxton may or may not be ready to take reps with the number 1s? Do you want to go that route and have a second-year player who got very little experience in his first year, being your number 1 left tackle? So I think that's where, if they go offensive line with that first pick or first couple rounds, I think it's going to be a left side player, right? So that's why these talks about Membu and some of these right side players, I don't see it. So we talked about it with Eric Edholm in terms of if Will Campbell's there, number 10, I think that could very well be the pick. And remember, Will Campbell is a guy that for me is probably a left guard, but I've had so much respect for his game and for what the tape he's put out there at LSU that I would give him a shot, at left tackle and let him fail there, and then put him inside at left guard. But that could be the pick of number 10. And if that's the pick of number 10, I think Will Campbell has a chance to come in here and compete for that starting left tackle job week 1. So, right. And then if you go second round, Josh Simmons is a guy that I'm high on a lot. I will stay on this kid, and I'll say if he hadn't gotten injured, you're looking at a top 15, top 10 pick here at left tackle with Josh Simmons from Iowa State. So, but he's coming off a patella injury, so that's the medicals are huge there. Another guy I like in the second round is Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon. He's a guy that, again, could play left guard for you initially and then could kick out to left tackle as well. So, there are some options there for you. But I think if they go offensive line, besides getting depth, on the interior, I think specifically you're talking about tackles, I think they're going to go a left side player, a guy that can play left guard, left tackle, as opposed to going on someone that can play right guard, right tackle.
Yeah, let's stay on Connerly because I just saw that he is either scheduled for a top 30 visit or it's already happened. And I know in your mock draft 1.0, you had him going to the Bears with the first or second of the second round draft picks.
I believe it was the second first round pick. I have his notes here somewhere. I think it might be right here. But yeah, he's a guy.
Yeah, as you're looking for your notes, I just want to add that that J2K is very high on Josh Connerly. I don't know how much we respect J2K's opinions.
J2K is good, dude. He's a good dude.
He's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Connerly, 6'5", 311 is what he measured at the combine. 33.5-inch arm length. Former 5-star high school recruit. Coming out. It was actually a running back. Played running back at high school. But highly recruited, picked Oregon over some powerhouse schools. But yeah, this is a guy for me. He's got some nasty in his, and I love offensive linemen that show some nastiness to him. But yeah, he's got the versatility at least to play left tackle or left guard. And I think that's a guy. If you can get him in the second round, now you kind of pull up some mock drafts, you see him kind of be hovering in that lower half of the first round. So we're not sure if he's be there, but if he is there, that's a guy you can bring in. And again, nice insurance policy there. Could use another year or so to kind of get better. But like when I watch this tape, I think and one of the reasons I like him at guard, I think he fares better versus bigger, more powerful, stout pass rushers like defensive tackles than he does against speed edge guys. So that's why I kind of saw him better as a left guard. But I would not rule out the possibility of him playing left tackle at the next level, especially with some more development under his belt there, professionally. So, and getting coached up and so on and so forth. So yeah, Josh Connerly Jr.'s top of the second round area could be a guy that you can target there as a potential left tackle replacement for Braxton Jones too.
I told you we were going to talk about left tackle, but going to be left guard, Kelvin Banks. And you reminded me that very early on, you said, I don't see this guy as a left tackle. And today I'm really reading Dane Brugler, and he says Kelvin Banks is definitely going to be a left guard. To get the most out of him, you got to move him inside. So before you talk to me about Kelvin Banks, let's see what our good buddy Eric Edholm wrote about him. With 42 starts at left tackle, there's a large body of work for scouts to sink their teeth into. Banks isn't quite the top 10 project I imagine he might be this year, but he has enough power and athleticism, and he just ranked him as an offensive lineman, not a tackle or guard. Tell me why you, Danny Shimon, are so convinced that he is better suited for the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, I've not been as high as other people have been on Kelvin Banks for a while, and I just watched it. He was highly touted. He was a top left tackle coming into this whole season actually, and I put the tape on and whether it's a power rush, a defensive end that's converting speed to power, or just a pure speed guy in the IG. He just, for me, he just is lethargic. I don't like the way his body language is. I just feel like he's someone that gets beat regularly, whether it's on the outside or inside. I think if you convert speed to power, you get into his chest, you can walk him back into the quarterback, as Jalen Walker, the Georgia linebacker, did as well, as Michael Williams was able to do as well. So yeah, for me, as like he's too much of a liability to play left tackle, and I kick him inside to left guard and see what he could do there. But every year I go into some of these drafts, I'm like, I just don't see this with this player. And this is one kid I saw it early on. I'm like, I just don't know what others are seeing him in terms of projecting him as a left tackle. So for me, he's a guy that's and I don't want to knock on him, but I just the tape is soft. From what I watch, it's soft tape, and I don't like calling players soft, but it's just not something that impresses me, that jumps out at me. And to be honest with you, and I haven't done any sort of the background stuff. I haven't done any school visits, and that's where you get a lot of this inside information. But man, it just feels like he doesn't love the game. And again, I'm just observing his tape and reading some of the body language, some of the way he moves. But that's why for me he'd be a guard and a guy. To be honest with you, I probably would even touch in the first half of that first round. Now, if you're in the low 20s, if you're like Chiefs or something like that you can bring him in. You got some veterans that can kind of help him, maybe coach him up, kick him in a left guard where you have a need now at left guard. I think that's an ideal area for him to land there with some veterans and maybe some. He can get coached up there, but he's got the athletic ability. He's got the traits. But I just the tape for me was not matching what everyone else was talking about him. It's definitely not a left tackle. Maybe a left guard. It could be something where he could flourish at the next level.
Tooch wants to know who is your favorite left tackle in this draft.
Well, if we're gonna go just left tackle, if all things being equal, no injury whatsoever, it'll be Josh Shimon, the kid from Ohio State. I think he's got big time potential. Only played 6 games, got injured in the 6th game this season. Former San Diego State transfer, was his second season here at Ohio State. Was a right tackle at San Diego State last year at Ohio State. Played, I believe, all 14 games. Started at left tackle. Albeit he was making the transition. Didn't look great at left tackle. This year he looked slimmer. It looked like he lost some weight. Looked a lot more athletic, a lot more lighter on his feet, and he was looking dominant in that first 6 games for Ohio State. Unfortunately, tore his patella tendon in that Oregon game and was lost for the rest of the season. So now everything kind of rides on his medicals. What's the injury timeline? What does he lose in terms of any sort of lateral agility, so on and so forth. So that's a huge question mark, hanging over his head. Moving on from Josh Simmons, all things being equal, again, Lewis Campbell is a hell of a left tackle in the SEC. The arm length thing is something that we've discussed and debated over and over again, and I'm a proponent of that. I believe in my tackles need to have the prerequisite arm length. Now, are there tackles that play left tackle or in right tackle that don't have the 34 plus in jumps? Yes, but those are more outliers than they are, the current trend, or if you will. So, but having said that, I love his tape. I love his tenacity. I love his football competitiveness. I love the way he can recover when he's getting bullied back into the quarterback. So, having said that, I would give him an opportunity to prove to me that he can't play left tackle before I just say, you're a left guard, right? Because I know I have that fallback where I can always kick him inside left guard, and I'll have probably a Pro Bowl left guard for the next 10 years, but I would give him a shot. So I'd go Josh Simmons, Will Campbell probably, and then we talk about, Josh Connolly Jr. He's another guy top of that second round where I really kind of pictured him there, and that'd be another guy I could look at here as potentially another left tackle.
All right, I hate to go here, Danny, but J2K has brought it up. He wants to talk safeties. Have you watched Sebastian Castro out of Iowa? I know we met with him at the Combine. He could be a 5th-round pick. He really, J2K really likes his tape. It's a fun watch. And I recall seeing him play in a couple of Iowa games this year. He's a guy that caught my eye, very aggressive, very good in run support is what I saw in the 2 Iowa games that I witnessed. What are your thoughts on Castro? Have you had a chance to study?
Castro, I haven't delved into his tape yet. I just started working on the safeties. As a matter of fact, I think tomorrow or next day I'm going to be putting out on Shimon Draft Scout my Xavier Watts tape. So I have listened to the people. I have delved into the safety tape. But Castro was a guy that caught my eye, actually, J2K, at the Senior Bowl. And I think that's where he was making some plays there as well. So he's a guy that's on my list to go ahead and look at. But in terms of safeties, right, this is a position that's slowly creeping up as being a big need here for the Bears. And I don't want to take a safety in the first round. So certain safeties I've already kind of marked off because I don't think the Bears are going to take a safety in the first round. Second round, we already earmarked some positions for running back, tackle, maybe edge guy. If you don't get an edge guy in the first round, defensive tackle possibly. So now we're looking at pick 75 in that 3rd round range where you could be looking for a safety. So that's where I'm kind of picturing and seeing where my safety comes in. Now, for Castro, you mentioned J2K as a guy, maybe day 3, which would be fine. That'd be a nice, get there. But guys in that third round range I'm looking at are guys like maybe Xavier Watts if he drops that far down low. Maybe guys that look further down, if like in the fourth round, if you get a fourth round pick, Andrew Mukaba from Texas is a guy, 4-year started his first 3 years at Clemson, came last year, transferred last year to Texas. All he did was lead Texas with 5 interceptions. A guy that fills the lane with aggressiveness downhill. So only 5'11", 186. So he doesn't have a big safety, but he's a guy that plays bigger than his size. So he's a guy I'm looking at here, and possibly late day 2, early day 3. Malachi Starks is going to go probably first, second round. We don't want that. One guy, the more I watch, the more I love him. Even when I'm watching Danny Stutzman tape, the guy that keeps sticking out for me is Billy Bowman Jr. And he's that guy that I'm just, the more I watch, the more I love. And now 5'10", 192, ran a 4.42 40, 1.52 10-yard split. 4-year starter with 41 career starts at Oklahoma. This is a guy that was a first team All Big 12 in 2023, where he led the Big 12 with 6 interceptions, 3 of which he returned back for a touchdown. So he's got that big play potential. Talk about aggressiveness. Again, only 5'10", 192. I understand that, but he comes downhill and he wraps up. He wraps up and he gets to those ankles and he brings that ball carrier down. So I love that about him. Gives me some Mike Brown vibes for all those Bears fans that remember Mike Brown. Kind of aggressive, but I think Bowman might be a little bit more athletic than Mike Brown. But man, this is a guy that I don't know if he's going to be there at pick 75, but if you're looking for a safety, and again, it's not a huge safety, right? But especially if we're talking about replacing possibly, Jaquan Brisker, Billy Bowman Jr. is a guy that I'm going to be doing a report on, posting him up on Shimon Draft Scout. And another guy that I've kind of started breaking down as well. And now if you're looking for a Jaquan Brisker type, a guy that's a guy, some size to him, some length to him, and is also a guy that plays with some physicality, can bring you some of that enforcer type in the backfield. Jonah Stanker from Virginia is a safety, is 6 feet, 206 pounds, 32.25-inch arms, 3-year starter, 2-time first-team All-American. He's a guy, the ball skills aren't great, only has two career interceptions, got 17 passes defense, but he had like 4 forced fumbles. So this is the guy that can come downhill with aggression. It will pop you. All right, he's got some good size again to him. Well, but he'll come down, he'll pop you. And I'm talking about a guy that can be versatile, right? Because one thing Dennis Allen likes, he wants safeties that are interchangeable. He doesn't want just a free safety or just a strong safety. He wants a guy that or safeties that can be interchangeable. And I think Sanker is comfortable playing down low near the line of scrimmage, if you want to call it in the box. But also, I think he's comfortable back in the back half as well, giving some of that over the top help as well. So, Jonas Sanker, Billy Bowman Jr., these are guys at pick 75. If you need a safety, that's the area where I'm looking for one of these guys possibly going at.
What about the Penn State safeties?
Well, I haven't got to Winston Jr. I haven't gotten to him yet. He's a guy that's coming off of an injury, so he hasn't done much testing so far. But he's another guy that's on my list. But more so a guy, again, pick 75, that could be that range for Winston Jr. as well. So yeah, he's a guy that I also on my list here to look at. But Bowman Jr., Sanker right now are tops for me. Makuba's another guy I like a lot. Again, guys, I'm talking about, third round, area, not I'm talking about, first, second round. So that's where I've scratched right. Because the more you think about it, the more the uncertainty around Jaquan Brisker, the more it kind of worries you. Because, you have Elijah Hicks, and I know they signed Tavares Moore, who's a veteran, but he's more of a special teams kind of guy. Right. And if you don't go safety in this round, you do have a couple of veterans out there. You have Blackman from Julian Blackman from the Colts is out there. And you also have Justin Simmons, who 31 years old. Obviously he's been known for, being a ball hawk type of safety. Maybe as a 1-year, veteran, just kind of fill in. But again, we're all assuming that Jaquan Brisker, it might not be able to play. So, but if Brisker's healthy and here's hoping he stays healthy, it might not be that big of a need. I know Kevin Byers in the last year of his contract, he's an aging veteran, but he's coming off a pretty good season. So Brisker is the guy that gives you the more worries there, because you never know. It could be a hit, it could be a week 2, it could be a week 7. We never know what happens where the concussion thing could come back up again. Hopefully it doesn't. But that's where, for me now, safety has become slowly but surely becoming a more and more of a need for this team. Something where at least they have to have some insurance. So that's why I'm not using a round 1 or round 2 pick on them. maybe a round 3, maybe if you get a round 4 pick, or definitely a round 5 pick. So J2K, to your guy, Castro could be a guy in that round 5 area where you could kind of highlight them there.
Danny, with those 4 picks that the Bears have in the top 72 picks of the NFL draft, there's a possibility that there could only be 1 starter or maybe even 0 starters on those 4 picks, because if they draft an interior offensive lineman, they basically have their 3 starters there. If they draft a tight end, he would be a starter only on if it's Tyler Warren, he would be a starter only in the 12 formations. If they draft a defensive lineman, an edge rusher, we've already got our starters there, unless, of course, those starters lose out in camp. So I say to you, how would you feel about that if we basically improve the depth of the team, but don't add more than 1 significant starter to this lineup?
Well, I thought about that because I came into this draft process. We got to get at least 3 or 4 starters of those 4 picks. But and you're right. With the additions they made in the interior offensive line, they might get some guy for depth there, right? Miles Frazier from LSU comes to my mind there. A guy can play right guard for you, maybe some left guard as well. But just kind of looking at that, Michael Williams could be a guy that they could go to number 10. And he's not going to be a starter probably week 1, but he could be a guy that can come in and contribute. So what I'm trying to say is, as long as those picks are contributing, right? So if it's a tight end, he's contributing, to the production there on offense. If it's a running back, maybe he's not the starter over DeAndre, or maybe he is a starter, who knows? But at least as long as he's contributing, as long as those 3 to 4, first picks are playing and contributing, I think that's where you kind of go from there. Because if you get a Will Campbell, obviously he's going to go in and probably compete for left tackle, right? And if Braxton Jones or whoever beats him out, then he's a backup. Then you don't get much contribution there. But other than that, if it's Michael Williams, it's edge guy. If it's Quinton Junkins or on a running back you pick in the 2nd round, he's gonna come in. He's gonna play. If you do go for a tight end, he's gonna come in. He's gonna contribute. He's gonna play. So I think that's where you gotta look at and see the type of contributions these guys make. These draft picks make in that first year. I think that you can go from there. Not necessarily how many games they start, but how much contribution and what kind of impact do they make on the Bears, winning next season.
J2K brings up that Anthony Belton, the offensive lineman out of NC State, is one of the guys that is scheduled to visit the Bears as the top 30. Have you done any work on the NC State offensive lineman?
I did him at the Senior Bowl. I haven't done his NC State tape yet. NC State, I said tape yet. But Belton was a guy at Senior Bowl impressed me in terms of ability to play left tackle there. So he's a possibility there too. And possibly, I think he's more that late 2nd, early 3rd round area too. So that could be a target there at pick 75. So Anthony Belton is a kid that's got, I believe he's got 34 in a 1/4 inch arm length, if I'm not mistaken. 6'4", 6'5" is his height. So I know Jonas Savaiinaea is a guy that I've done a lot in terms of Arizona. I have his report up on Shimon Draft Scout, and he's a guy that played left tackles, played right tackle. I see him more as a right side player, probably right tackle, right guard. But again, that's a guy that gives you some of that physicality at the point of attack, at the line of scrimmage. But again, you have Darnell Wright at right tackle, you have Jonah Jackson at right guard. So how much of a contribution will you get from Jonah Savaiinaea? Again, he's played left tackle this past season in Arizona. Savaiinaea played left tackle for Arizona. I don't see him as a left tackle type of player at the next level, but he does have that experience there. So curious to see. But he's another one that's coming in as well.
Yeah, I just took a look at Dane Brugler's arm measurement on Belton, getting back to him, and it was at 34 5/8 at his pro day. So that's quite a leap. I think
he's got the length, so he's got the size. Again, impressed me at the Senior Bowl practices. I think he's a guy that I'm definitely going to do some work on. He's a guy that I've done initial work on. I haven't done the in-depth to be able to do a report and present it on Jessica, but I will, because right now I'm done with my safeties here coming up. I'm going to then go back now and do some more, onesie twosies, offensive, defensive linemen here. Think about doing cornerback. Not sure. Maybe the people in the chat can chime in. Do you guys think we should do cornerbacks, or do we just kind of wait and see what happens with that corner position as the draft rolls on?
Yeah, that's my vote there. One more thing about Belton that Brugler writes is that he was ejected for spitting on a Clemson player in that September 2024 game.
That's not
Clemson
good.
defensive lineman T.J. Parker said early in the game he was trying to fight somebody and he was talking crazy. That's embarrassing for an offensive lineman. So he put that down as one of the weaknesses. Anytime you spit on another
Yeah, that's
athlete,
not
that's
good.
not a good look. So,
Yeah, that's not a good
but
look.
you never know. He could have been talking about his mother. In that case, all bets are off. So,
Yeah. Let's talk about the mama.
exactly. We're approaching the 2-hour mark. I want to see if there's a question here that, okay. Brian Gilmore says, Danny and Aldo, who are some names to watch as far as UDFA? And the first name that comes to mind with me is Chasim what's his name now? I'm forgetting the kid. Effin Chisholm. Yeah. Because this guy was, we had Eric Galko on, the director of the East-West Shrine Bowl game, and I had read that Chisholm was very impressive at the Shrine Bowl game and in the practices. And so I asked Galko about it, and Galko said that he brought him to the Shrine Bowl game because a number of NFL scouts said, I'm trying to make a case for my GM on this kid because I love him. So, please invite him to the Shrine Bowl game so he can showcase. The problem is that he ran a 4.71 at his pro day. Chisholm did. He wasn't even invited to the combine. And so that tells you, and Brugler wrote about him saying he's outstanding at route running, but he isn't going to win any foot races. And so, but he's a guy that I would love to bring to camp as an undrafted free agent and maybe stash him in the practice squad. He's never going to get any faster, but potentially he could be that slot receiver that could develop into an Edelman type player. What do you think, Danny?
Yeah, he's a more quicker than fast type of player. I know they use him as a punt returner at the East West Shrine game. He's a guy that, again, shifty, quick. But yeah, he's a guy that I just kind of screams undrafted free agent, priority free agent they bring in. There's a guy that I kind of touched on real quick with Eric, and this running back from Arizona, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, also was at the East West Shrine game, also looked very impressive, hard runner. I want to dig into his tape. I unfortunately I'm not able to get my hands on his tape right now. I may try to pull up, some other ways to get him there, but he's a guy that to keep an eye on there. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, running back out of Arizona, is another guy that could be a potential undrafted free agent. I know there's a linebacker from Buffalo that you like a lot, although I just haven't been able to get my hands on his
Shane
tape.
Dolick, yeah.
So that's another guy that you can keep an eye on there. So what they're going to do is they're going to bring in these guys that have some certain traits, right? Whether it's speed, whether it's size, whether it's potential to be a plug and play backup, or a guy that could be a demon on special teams, and that's where they're going to try and see if they can bring in some of these guys. We could have some guys where drop through the cracks because of some off the field stuff and things like that, where the scouts halfway through the draft they start calling these guys, say, hey, listen, if you're not drafted, we want to bring you in, we want to sign you. And I know Greg's told the story to you, told it to me multiple times, where that after the draft, as soon as the draft ends, that the scouts and all these people are calling these guys and trying to get these guys signed. That is some hectic stuff going on there. They're all trying to bounce each other, and obviously the agents playing one team against another and trying to up the signing bonus and all that stuff, because I believe the only thing that's guaranteed is their signing bonus, whatever they signed for. So that's interesting as well. That's one thing when the draft ends, like it was like, oh, okay, we're good, 56 picks in, we're done. Then I start scrolling to see, all right, who's getting signed, and who went undrafted, and who's going where, and a lot of times you see a guy commit to one team, and next thing you know, another team comes in, scoops him up with more guaranteed money, and he's gone off to that team as well. So that's something that we'll take a look at.
And J2K says Addison West out of Western Michigan could be a undrafted free agent find. And that's typically, Brian Gilmore, who asked the question, that's typically where you look at when you're trying to uncover potential undrafted free agents, is those positions that are considered strengths in the draft. So, for instance, running backs, because there are 30-plus guys who are probably going to be drafted in the draft at the running back position, there could be another 3, 4, 5, 6 guys who become undrafted free agents that you can pick up, stash into your roster, like an Ian Wheeler type. He was an undrafted free agent, and you can find a healthier one. I hate to talk about them as commodities, but that's the game of the National Football League. So look at those positions: interior offensive line, interior defensive line, the running back position. Those are probably you might find a gem at the UDFA.
Linebackers could be Nick Martin. I think Nick Martin will get drafted. Athletically, he's good enough to get drafted. So, but that could be a guy to keep an eye on. Guy we just talked about today. Riley Mill from Ryan Mills. I forgot his name. Ryan Mills, I believe, from the defensive tackle from Notre Dame. Big, strong dude. Tore his ACL, I believe, in one of the playoff games. So, he could be a guy that has got some size. He's got the size to be able and the tape to be drafted. But depending on the injury, how he's recovering, he could be a guy that could slip through the crack there as well. So, a lot of times you'll see guys that kind of slip through the cracks and go undrafted. And you're like, what? I know that guy. I've seen the guy play on Saturdays multiple times. What the hell happened? And there's always a story behind why these guys fall and slip through the cracks. But yeah, you can definitely get. How many stories have you heard about undrafted free agents going on becoming Pro Bowlers and being contributors and on teams and so on and so forth? So yeah, it's always you can always find talent. If you've got talent, these scouts will, especially nowadays, these scouts will find you.
Yeah, scout and develop, draft and develop is the old saying. Tooch has a question about Trey Harris, the Ole Miss receiver. He only played in 6 games, but had 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's the kind of guy, very fast, 23 miles an hour at times. He was timed, can take that slant to the house. Have you studied him?
I've studied him a little bit, Tooch, but I like Jordan Watkins, his teammate, a little bit better, because Trey Harris is more of the ex outside receiver for me. I think Watkins could be some of that slot guy, and we talked about Ben Johnson and some of the little crumbs he's been kind of sprinkling here and there in his interviews. He always talks about, there was an interview where he said that for whatever reason that the slot receiver got a lot of action in his offense in previous years. So obviously, I think that's one area which there's may have filled with it was Zacchaeus, the free agent signing from Washington, but I still like to get some reinforcement. So I have my eye on some slot receivers, and Watkins is a guy that Aldo and I are going to be producing a day 3 gems video here coming up soon, and he may or may not be on my day 3 gems video here, guys. So just stay tuned for some of those.
Can't wait for that. That's going to be fun. Fizzle Joe wants to know if Poles and Company have Mason Graham ranked very high on their board, but he is not available. Do you think that the Bears then turn to Grant, the kid out of Michigan?
It's hard to say, Joe, because we don't know who else is available, right? Well, what if Will Campbell's available? I think you go Will Campbell at that point, right? What if Genty is available? I think they might go Genty or something like that, for example. But I'm high. I am high. Me personally, I'm higher on Grant in terms of what he can do, where he can become at the next level. Again, only I think 20. He's going to turn 21, soon here. But it's a guy that big guy, 6'3", 300 plus pounds. Could play multiple positions along the defensive line. You can play him at nose guard if you want. You can play him at 3 technique. You can play him 1 technique. You name it. But shows flashes of ability to get up and be a penetrating up the field kind of defensive tackle at that size and at that length. And I just think he has more room to get better and to grow and to develop. And I can just picture an interior of him and Gervon Dexter and Andrew Billings and if you want Gray Jarrett. I think that is a nice little core there inside the middle of the defensive line. But he still needs time, right? Grant still needs time. We'll be in a prior rotation, but it won't be a finished product anytime soon. So I think that's something you have to keep in mind there as well. Whereas Mason Graham, I don't want to kind of sound like I'm down on Graham. I think he's gonna be a fine player. I just think he's kind of elevated up. And Eric agreed with this me as well. He's been elevated up this draft board just because of the lack of some of the talent overall in terms of upper tier blue chip players. But he's a guy that he put on his tape. Energizer Bunny. The guy's always on. He's whether it's the run defense, whether it's the pass rush, he's the one through, if you want to call it, true 3 technique in this draft class. And I think that's where you could see him kind of flourish there at this defense here. But again, in terms of Dennis Allen, doesn't have the length that we talked about, only 32-inch arms. Could he go ahead and still play here? Sure, he can still play here. But I just don't see him as an ideal fit. And then I just like the potential of Grant long term, as opposed to what Graham will give you now.
Boy, I got probably another hour or hour and a half of questions and dialogue with you, but I have reached the 2-hour mark, so let's save some for next week's show. We'll be back here next Wednesday. And I want to remind people that they should be a subscriber to Danny's channel. Tell us a little bit more about Shimon Draft Scout on YouTube.
Yeah, so we're moving through the position groups here, guys. I just posted Elijah Arroyo, the tight end from Miami. I believe one of our listeners that had requested him. He's out there today. Very talented kid. A guy that really has been dealing with a lot of injuries the last couple seasons. I think he's a guy that's got some potential here if he stays healthy. So I've gone through the first wave of tight ends. Now I'm kind of starting into the safeties here. Xavier Watts should be up there within a day or two, and then I'm going to move on to Makuba and some of the guys we talked about, Sinker and Billy Bowman Jr. here as well. So look for those to come out. And then once the safeties are out, Aldo said no corner, so I'm going to bypass the cornerback position, and I'm going to circle back around. I'm going to go back and look at some offensive linemen that may have missed on the first wave. I'll go back and take a look at some defensive tackles and the edge guys I may have missed in the first wave. And then any other player you guys want me to go ahead and post up there and do an in-depth scouting report on. I'll do some receivers here as well. Jalen Noel from Iowa State is a guy I'm going to be high on. Isaac Tesla, the kid from Arkansas, is a guy I could be one of my day 3 gems. I don't want to give too much away here, but he's a guy that I'm very interested in here as well. Obviously Jordan Watkins, and then we'll take a look at Trey Harris here as well for Tooch. So yeah, if there's any players you guys feel like I missed in the first wave, whether it's offensive, defensive line, linebackers, whatnot, hit me up either on X or at the channel, and just let me know, and I'll go and get some tape and run a report for you guys. Well, it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tomorrow is night 1 or round 1. So it's coming here fast and furious. So just all I'm doing is just basically watching tape and breaking down films and running up reports.
We got a great compliment from Cliff Victoria earlier. He said that he has stopped watching Bears draft podcasts, with the exception of this one and maybe a couple of others, because this one has people who know what they're talking about as opposed to people just talking crap.
Appreciate that.
And I just want to make sure that people follow our friends over at the Bears Country Productions, and of course Danny's channel, Shimon Draft Scout, and please give Eric Edholm a follow on the X machine, and that is at ERIC Edholm, EDHOLM. For Danny, my name is Aldo Gandia. We'll see you next week, same time, same station. Bye-bye.